Welcome to another edition of our Ohio State Big Ten show. The big question today, who is the MVP of our team? Is it our Wasserman? Is it Bill Landis, the new guy? Or is it me, because I've been here forever and been doing this since you guys were like in middle school? We'll, of course, let the fans vote later. It's probably going to all get votes for Ari.
I think it's Marvin.
It might be Marvin. Marvin Fong takes great photos. Does he take great photos?
Photos by Fong.
He takes great photos. But we'll actually discuss more legitimate MVPs today as we try to sort of assess Ohio State's season so far. The Buckeyes, as we know, off this week, their second bye week of the season, and then starting next week, it's a long haul till the end of the year. So we'll look at the offense, we'll look at the defense, the MVPs on both sides of the ball. But first, we're going to start looking at the offense, and we have to start with JT Barrett in talking about this offense. I think when we get to the MVP discussion, we have to take him out of the equation because he's been so efficient, so consistent. But Bill, just as you evaluate this offense overall, and we're going to give grades to the offense before we're done here, talk about JT, talk about the offense, the way it's evolved the last 3 games after everything we saw sort of go wrong against Virginia Tech.
Yeah, when you look at JT Barrett, I think against Navy, I don't want to say he looked nervous, but he looked kind of shaky, and you could tell that it was his first college start. And against Virginia Tech, I think you could tell that was his first start in a really raucous environment against a good defense. Since then, he's gotten much better. I think better than I thought he would be at this point. And what I like about JT that we've seen, especially against Maryland, I think against Kent State and against Cincinnati, he was kind of throwing to open receivers a lot and taking the safe route, still picking up yards and making plays, but taking the easy passes. Against Maryland, I thought he was throwing into tighter spots. He made a great throw, I thought, to Nick Vannett between the safety and the cornerback that I think is one of the best throws he's made all year. He's throwing jump balls or more jump balls to receivers. I think he's trusting his teammates more, taking more chances in the passing game. And because of that, the offense, I think, also has gotten better over the last 3 games.
JT Barrett, 88 of 133 for 1,354 yards so far, 66% on his completions, 17 touchdowns against just 5 interceptions. He is throwing for 271 yards per game. He's 4th in the nation in that quarterback efficiency rating, which sort of takes everything into consideration. And he's running the ball a little bit. What do you think of JT in this offense so far?
I think half our readers hate me because I came into the season.
For a lot of reasons.
For a lot of reasons, but kind of because I didn't candy coat the loss of Braxton Miller. I thought that was going to be a crippling thing for this team. And by no stretch of the imagination, it hurt them against Virginia Tech. And I'm not sure if Ohio State would have won or lost that game, but there was still some inexperience for JT. That said, I could not be more impressed with the way he's come along. And I mean, everything that Bill said, I mean, even something like throwing a jump ball just shows confidence that he can make a throw that, you know, is a pretty big throw for a guy his age. So the presence in the pocket, the decision making, he hasn't made any really huge mistakes since that red zone pick against Navy, like glaring freshman, oh my God, mistakes. He knows when to run, he knows when to stay, he knows how to distribute it, seems to be the leader. That was the thing they talked about for months before we even knew he was even going to be on the field this year, about how big of an leader he is. So as far as the quarterback position is concerned, I think that we're starting to see it shift from him being a freshman they have to protect to him being a weapon that other teams have to account for. And I think given he's only played half a season in his entire career, he's come along a lot further and more impressively than I thought.
I still think there is some room to take a little bit of it with a grain of salt with the defenses Ohio State has faced. In terms of points allowed, Kent State ranks 96th in the nation in scoring defense. Cincinnati's 114th. Navy's 89th. Maryland was a little better. Maryland was a half step up, I thought, this week. Maryland's 67th in the nation in points allowed. They're going to start facing a little bit better quality of defense here in the Big Ten now. Rutgers is in the top 50, and Penn State has only given up 14.6 points per game so far this year. Again, maybe their schedule hasn't been great, but I do think they're going to get tested a little bit more. But right now, looking at what we've seen from this offense, what are our grades for the offense so far? Bill, grade this offense through this start.
I would give the offense a B. Because I think, like you said, the defenses that they've gone against, I think kind of skew the numbers a bit. And I think that's a valid argument. And I also think there's a lot of room for improvement still. Like JT has played very well, but I still think there's another level that he can get to even this year. It's not an elite level, but still particularly in the running game, I think. He still, for me, makes some, I don't want to say bad decisions, but when they run that read option that he's been pretty good in, there's been a couple times where he's kept it when I thought he shouldn't have kept it, and it's led to some losses. So there's still areas for JT to grow. There's still areas for the offense to grow, which is why I'll give him a B, and I think maybe they can get to a B+, or maybe even an A-. A- might be kind of stretching it a bit, but I think they can be a B+ defense by the end of the season.
I'm going to give him a B too. I think it's one of those, if you were taking a test and you got a lot of questions right, but there was one question that you didn't even understand the question. You know, like you wrote it in the wrong language. Like that's what the Virginia Tech game was. Yeah. And as much as they've improved since that, you can't wipe that away completely as you evaluate this team. Obviously, they've improved since then, but I think based on the last 3 games, even with the defenses, you could definitely be like in the A- range.
Yeah.
But I think based on that, I would give him a B as well.
Let me ask you guys a question before I answer. Did you think Ohio State would have beat Virginia Tech if Braxton was healthy?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because that determines my grade. I'm going to give him a B+. I was going to go A if one of you said no, because they talked all year about how this team is going to be stacked with offensive playmakers, guys that were going to be able to change the game on their own, and I didn't think that the onus necessarily had to be all on JT's shoulders. So if you think that JT was the reason, in his inexperience and being a deer in the headlights type of thing towards that Bear defense was the reason they lost that game, then he can't recover from that and get an A. But as far as the way he's progressed since
This
then,
is the whole offense that we're talking about.
Yeah. Just the way that he's progressed, and I think it's such a big part of the offense, and the way that Ezekiel Elliott's kind of asserted himself. We'll get to that soon, and moving the football. I think that Ohio State's offense gets probably a B. They've scored 50 points in 3 straight games, and I didn't think they were capable of scoring 50 points 3 weeks ago at all, let alone in 3 straight. So they certainly get a B, but if you can't score and you lose a game because of it, the thing that always sticks out in my mind too is that they had 3 possessions down by 7 to tie that game in Virginia Tech, and they couldn't even get a first down, I don't think.
Right.
So that is huge to me.
You can't ignore that.
You can't ignore it. So, I'm going to stick with you guys, B+, maybe.
We want to hear what your grades are. If you want to comment now, we'll be asking you later in the week as well for what your grades are for this team. And now we will get in to the defensive side of the ball, which is a little...
I don't want to interrupt you, but we have a few comments on offense,
Okay.
about offense before we go. Take a few minutes, I think. First of all, Cyber Sophist, I think I'm saying it right. I have a hard time reading sometimes. Says, when will Jeff Hireman finally assert himself as a big playmaker? And I think that we just got done talking about the offense, and this is supposed to be their best player, right? Or one of them. We haven't really heard or seen much from him. Granted, he was injured, but he's played now. When are we going to see something out of him?
I think we could see it soon. It seems like they maybe use the double tight end look a little bit more. That was something we've been talking about since the spring about they have 2 great tight ends. Urban Meyer talks about it all the time. I think you can create mismatches with those guys, whether in the run game, if you want to stack things on one side with them, or in the pass game. You mentioned the pass to Nick Vannett. I think they're both good pass catchers. You know, it's cliche to talk about throwing to the tight end. I do think they can work the middle of the field. Those are some more difficult throws to make, but you mentioned the throw to Vannett. If JT Barrett can make those kind of throws, I think we could see Jeff Hireman and Nick Vannett both emerge more.
Yeah, and I talked about the jump balls that JT seems to be more comfortable throwing. He threw one to Jeff Hireman in the 3rd quarter against Maryland, and Hireman did a great job of adjusting to the ball in the air, stepping in front of his guy. He was like fully extended and made a great catch. It was one of the better catches in the game. So I think we're going to see more and more of Hireman being used. He was hurt, and now he's getting back, and I think he's going to be used more.
That catch kind of reminded me of the Ballard catch from the Rose Bowl. I don't know if it was quite as extravagant and not obviously as big of a stage, but I thought it was a really good catch. One more. Did anyone seriously think that Ezekiel Elliott would be this good this soon?
I'm still not 100% sure how good Ezekiel Elliott is. I'm surprised a little bit by how well he's run through contact lately. I mean, he says he's not the same kind of power back that Carlos Hyde is, but I didn't think he could be this early in his career a 20 carry a game guy. I don't think that's what they want him to be, but he has done that already this year. I think he has been more physical and better getting yards on his own than I thought he might be.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he'd be more of a get it outside guy, and he's done that a bit, particularly on that option that they've had a lot of success with. But I've been really impressed with his ability to run it up the middle and break tackles and get 3-4 extra yards a pop on some plays.
Okay, defense.
Defense. A little more interesting to talk about. It's not so based on one guy, but the overall view of this defense so far, the Buckeyes are 35th in the nation in points allowed. They're giving up basically 21 points per game. That's 7th in the Big Ten. It's funny, Michigan State is barely ahead of Ohio State in that category. However, Michigan State played Oregon, and that sort of skewed things. Michigan State gave up 46 points against Oregon. Ohio State really hasn't played an offense like that. Virginia Tech's offense was good on that night and made Ohio State pay for mistakes. I feel like they haven't played a great balanced offense so far. So as you look at this defense, what grade do you give this defense so far this year?
C.
Extrapolate?
Yeah, I'm just like, actually my wheels were turning a little bit because I don't know, maybe even a C-. Because we spent all offseason, all preseason, they made a new hire in Chris Ash to be in charge of the secondary, talking about how the defensive breakdowns in the back end of that defense was the reason why they didn't go to a championship last year, wasn't the reason they won the Big Ten last year, and that was the biggest thing that this team had all offseason to work on. Yet, as we sit here right now, almost halfway through the regular season, that is still their biggest issue, and it's still happening. And it didn't necessarily, they didn't give up any huge touchdown plays against Maryland, which I guess is a good thing. But on the first pass by C.J. Brown, it might have been a touchdown if he would have just made the throw.
Yeah.
I mean, the breakdown happened. They didn't pay for it, but the breakdown happened. And I don't know if one game is enough for me to think that they're moving forward from that problem. And until they get a glaring weakness that will cost them against a very good team, C might even be too high.
I mean, the one thing is, I feel like they're taking some more aggressive risks and maybe giving up big plays as part of that. The biggest problem last year was all the little passes they gave up without challenging things that much. So if they have to make that trade-off, okay. I think they're still progressing even in that part of it, though.
Yeah, I think the thing that sticks out to me is that the defense, I don't think that the defense is really, they have one loss, and I don't think that loss was the fault of the defense. I think that loss was the fault of the offense. I agree with Ari and his assessment of the defense. I think they're about a C at this point, and I think it's because if you look at the numbers, people might look at it and say they're a little bit better. I think they're a top 50 defense right now in terms of yardage. You said they're a top 20 or 35th in the country in terms of points per game. But when you look at the yardage they've allowed, and I think they're 13th against the pass. If you take away the Navy game, they're 74th against the pass, which is a huge discrepancy in the passing numbers. So I think the passing defense has not been what it was advertised to be coming into this season. I still think there's a lot of holes there. I think, like you said, Doug, they've done a better job of maybe cutting off the short stuff, but the short stuff, I think, is, especially against the teams that they've played so far, the short stuff wasn't what was going to kill you. It was the deep stuff, like they gave up against Cincinnati and probably should have given up against Maryland had C.J. Brown been able to complete a pass or two. And the other thing about the defense I think that leads me to give them a C is the pass rush I don't think has been very good this year outside of Joey Bosa. I think I expected more from the offensive or defensive line. Obviously, Noah Spence isn't there, but with the guys that they have, and you have Michael Bennett, and you have Joey Bosa, and you have Adolphus Washington, a line that's considered by many to be one of the best in the country, I think to this point they should have been able to do more.
What are people saying here, Ari?
Yeah, there's a few things, and I just want to do the Joey Bosa celebration one time. Sorry about the technical difficulties. And they covered it up. Okay, well, somebody asked, is Joey Bosa stoppable? I think that the answer is no. We just got done talking about him. Is there anything else you want to add about Bosa?
Well, I think we'll get into him more when we talk about a defensive MVP. I mean, he came out in that brace for the game against Maryland. You have to account for him, which is why I thought the Noah Spence on one side, Joey Bosa on the other side would have been so great for this defensive line, because I don't think you really can block either of those guys one-on-one. But there was a play, I think, against Maryland where they shift their defensive line on third down. I think Joey Bosa ended up over a guard, and he was in the backfield in half a second. It's like you can't do that. So if you stop him, if you have a tackle and a guard double teaming him, or a running back or a tight end helping on him, but I don't think you can count on blocking him one-on-one.
Enough on Joey, because we're going to get to him when we get to the defensive MVP. And I think it's pretty obvious he was probably going to be for all three of us. Maybe not. But do you see Raekwon McMillan being the full-time starter soon?
I think there's a lot of things involved with that. I mean, I think they like Raekwon McMillan out in space more. That's why he's played some games where there's more passing involved. They're going to play him more than Curtis Grant. I think Curtis Grant can still play well against running teams. I think there are things there that Curtis Grant is playing better than he has in his career. He's earned some things as a senior, as a captain. He's, by all accounts, done a great job helping develop Raekwon McMillan. So I don't know. I mean, I think You got to get the best players on the field, yes. I think Curtis Grant is good enough to still play for this team, though. And I think no matter what Raekwon McMillan does, you could make a point that Curtis Grant deserves to start. Raekwon McMillan may play more often, but I don't think Curtis Grant deserves to disappear from this defense.
It's kind of like the basketball team a little bit, where it's like, don't get caught up with who starts the game, because 4 minutes into it, someone else might check in. And if he's playing the majority of the game, I mean, he played a lot.
He played a lot.
Yeah. He played a lot, and he made plays.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're ever going to get to the point either where it's Raekwon McMillan all the time. I think you made a good point, Doug, about Curtis Grant against running offenses. I think he's better suited at this point for a running offense than Raekwon McMillan is. He's bigger. I think he's a tougher guy to get out of the middle. So I think we're going to see them both. You might see Raekwon more, but I wouldn't expect Curtis Grant to disappear.
Do you think, one more question, do you think that the passing defense, and I know that we discussed this already, but do you think that's the only reason why Ohio State wasn't picked over Michigan State as the Big Ten favorite this year? And do you think that that is going to be the reason why Ohio State will likely be underdogs in that game November 8th?
I don't think it's the only reason. I think Michigan State's more complete on both sides of the ball right now with the way Connor Cook's developed. They're developing some receivers, Jeremy Langford running the ball for Michigan State, and then we know Michigan State's defense. I think they're more complete and more veteran maybe on both sides of the ball. I don't think it's just that one thing for Ohio State.
No, I think it's part of it, but Michigan State beat Ohio State on the neutral field last year in the Big Ten championship game. Michigan State should be favored against Ohio State at home.
But it is a stark contrast. They talk about the no-fly zone with Michigan State, that their secondary is the thing that people talk about almost the most. Meanwhile, it's the thing that is Ohio State's biggest problem.
Go.
So I'm going to give them a C as well. C for the defense. We want your grades on this defense. And now we're going to move to some individual honors. The offensive MVP of this team so far. And for this discussion only, we're going to take JT Barrett out of the equation, because I think if we left him in, it would be too easy to say that the guy running the offense and developing each week is the guy. Without JT Barrett, talking about the running backs, the receivers, maybe the offensive linemen, who's your offensive MVP, Bill?
My offensive MVP is receiver Michael Thomas, tied for first on the team with touchdowns with 5. He's tied with Devin Smith. But the reason I like Thomas is because he seems to be JT's go-to receiver. JT hasn't been in a position too much this year where he needs to be bailed out or he needs one of his receivers to make a play. But it seems like when he has been, in the rare occasions he has been in that situation, Michael Thomas is the guy that he's gone to. Thomas, for me, out of all the receivers, has shown the best ability to make plays and turn short gains into something bigger. And we saw the touchdown catch he had against Maryland was one of the best plays Ohio State's had all year. To go up over a guy, get both feet down in the end zone, that was a great play. And I think Michael Thomas has been maybe the most consistent player on the offense outside of JT Barrett.
17 catches leads the team, 322 receiving yards leads the team, 5 touchdown catches, tied with Devin Smith for the team lead. Who's your offensive MVP?
My offensive MVP is Ezekiel Elliott. You see how I pronounce his name right, Bill?
I did.
Ezekiel Elliott.
79 carries, 472 yards, 5.8 yards per carry, 92.4 yards per game for Elliott.
You know, I think he just played a lot better than I thought he would, and he's done things. I mean, he's been able to control a game or two by being a power runner, and we didn't even think he had that in his arsenal. So, you know, Michael Thomas has had big games, and he's, you know, scored 5 touchdowns this year, but he's also had games where he's caught 2 or 3 passes and hasn't been much of a factor. I think Ezekiel Elliott has been in the middle of Ohio State's game plan and has consistently performed the way he's performed all year. And, you know, I don't think he's been flashy. He's not Carlos Hyde, and that comparison is starting to get old because nobody really is, and he's a different type of player. But I think for being a sophomore who's really seeing his first extended responsibility, he's playing almost like a veteran. And, you know, since JT Barrett's out of the equation and no receiver is really lighting the fire, I mean, I think I would agree with you in the sense that Michael Thomas would be my pick if I had to be a receiver. But right now, the most consistent player, I think, on the offense right now has to be Ezekiel Elliott.
But as you wrote this weekend, Michael Thomas is related to Keyshawn. You talked to Keyshawn about Michael Thomas. Does Keyshawn weigh into this decision at all? That things towards Michael Thomas? Keyshawn was very nice to talk to, right?
He was a very nice guy. Very nice.
And you're still sticking with Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah. We don't do personal favors.
I am going to go a little bit off the reservation. And in terms of MVP, in terms of being valuable, I'm going to say it's Darryl Baldwin, the right tackle. And the reason I'm going to say that is because I thought the right tackle spot had a chance to be the biggest problem on this Ohio State offense. Because if you're blocking, if you have 4 guys blocking, but you have a tackle getting beat every play, you can blow up your whole offense. Taylor Decker moving to the left side. this year from the right side. That was the spot where you didn't know exactly who was going to win that job. And for Darryl Baldwin as a senior, Bill, you wrote about him. He's a great story. He's a great guy to talk to, has a very good family. And the coaches say great things about him in terms of working hard, being humble, but he's playing pretty well. You know, like you could be a great guy, but if you're getting beat 6 times a game, you're getting beat 6 times a game. You thought maybe he struggled a little bit early, but if he was not playing well, we'd see JT Barrett running for his life, and he's a little bit less equipped than Braxton Miller to run for his life. That really hasn't been the case all that often this year. So to lock down a spot that could be a problem, I don't know if Darryl Baldwin's an all-Big Ten player, that kind of thing, but we haven't really talked about him because it hasn't been an issue.
Yeah, I thought against Navy, he had maybe some first-game jitters, that being the first start of his career, but since then, he's been very good, frankly, and we've talked a lot about the offensive line. We've talked about Billy Price and Jacoby Boren and Pat Elflein. We haven't talked much about Taylor Decker or Darryl Baldwin, and that's a good thing when you're talking about offensive linemen, because if you're not talking about them, that means they're doing their job well.
Quick thing about offensive linemen, got a comment. I don't even know if it's a question, but just read it on because you joined us, and we appreciate you. I believe that an A has to go to Billy Price. A young player on the offensive line, you see him opening holes, and you never really hear his name except for when he played out of position with a few disastrous snaps at center. O-line is not a glamour position like it is at linebacker with McMillan. With so many seniors gone, having a true freshman or a freshman excelling on the offensive line will pay off for years.
You know, I mean, there were a lot of questions about who's going to win jobs. Billy Price came from off the radar a little bit. They talked that he was a strong guy and all this, but I mean, that he won a job when maybe he wasn't initially in that mix. So to win it, and again, you know, I think he does deserve some credit for that.
Yeah, I think the offensive line as a whole kind of deserves credit for how they've come along, particularly since Virginia Tech. Still mixing and matching a bit, but haven't really lost much in the last 3 games, and that's a good sign when you're switching guys in and out.
So Darryl Baldwin, Ezekiel Elliott, Michael Thomas, our non-JT Barrett offensive MVPs. Now for the defensive MVP, Josh Perry leads this team at linebacker with 38 tackles. Von Bell's next with 31 tackles. Curtis Grant has 28. Joey Bosa, 3.5 sacks and 7 tackles for loss, leads the team. We know there have been some issues in the secondary. Ari, who's your defensive MVP so far for Ohio State?
It's not even close. Joey Bosa. I mean, he's a dominant player. He's going to be a first round, maybe a top 5 pick next year. And he's scored or led to more points than some offenses have. So he's just, I mean, there's not much else to say. Guy's a dominant player. He's one of the best players in the country, definitely one of the best in the Big Ten, and he changes games with being a dominant force.
It's crazy some of the comparisons that people are making for him so far as a guy who's still very young in his college football career as a true sophomore. I would pick Joey Bosa as well. Maybe he's even as obvious a choice as JT Barrett would be on offense. Bill, who's your defensive MVP?
I think it would be disingenuous to say that Joey Bosa is not the defensive MVP. I guess for the sake of being different, I'll say Darren Lee, the linebacker, is my defensive MVP. He's made a couple big plays. He had the fumble return for a touchdown against Navy that, of course, was caused by Joey Bosa. He had the interception last week against Maryland that was at a critical point in the game when Maryland looked like it might make it a close game before the half. He had the pick. He fumbled it. Raekwon McMillan picked it up, and then Ohio State scored 1 play later to, I think it was a 21-point lead at the half instead of maybe a 9-point lead at the half. So that was a big play. And Lee also, what I like about what he's doing for Ohio State's defense is, particularly on third down plays and passing plays, they go to that look where they go with the 3-down lineman, they move Bosa over, he's lined up over the guard, and Darren Lee is the guy they bring up as sort of a stand-up rush end, and I think he's been pretty good in that role. So he just does a lot of different things for the defense that I think help it out. Obviously, Bosa's the best player, but I think Lee has played a pivotal role this year too.
One more comment. I know we've only got a minute or 2 left. But it says, does anybody anticipate that Adolphus Washington will return to the opposite end position to turn over his tackle slot to Tommy Shutt?
I'm waiting for that. Yeah. I'm waiting for that. We'll talk to Urban Meyer's players tomorrow on Wednesday as part of this bye-week availability. I'm waiting to see what they have to say about that. They raved about Tommy Shutt in the preseason, how on most teams he'd be a starter. This is a chance for him to be a starter, to start inside, move Adolphus Washington back outside.
Yeah, I think I'm surprised they haven't done it yet, so I'm waiting for it as well.
Do we have time for one more offensive question?
Sure.
Will Tom Herman be around next season?
You know, people have been trying to get Tom Herman out of here in a good way, almost since he got here. The right job has to be there. People are asking this because he's a head coaching candidate. He wants to be a head coach. He's a sharp, young offensive mind. The worst thing that a great coordinator can do is leave for the wrong job. So he has Texas connections. He actually played went to college in California, though. He's a guy who could go anywhere. He certainly could be a candidate in the Big Ten, although as I've written about, maybe I'd like to see the Big Ten aim a little higher than a coordinator. I don't think he's in a hurry. I think he's in a good spot. He's learning from Urban Meyer. So if the right job is there, he's going to go when the right job is there and people want him. I don't think he's going to jump at the first job, though.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question whether or not he'll be around. I think if the offense keeps progressing the way it has, he's certainly going to be one of the hotter candidates when the season's over, but I think you're right. It has to be the right job.
What do you think?
I agree. I don't know what jobs are going to be available, but I don't think that it's smart to leave for a bad or a tough situation. And to me, I'm the recruiting guy. To me, go to a place where you know you can recruit. Mm-hmm. Don't go to a place where you can't bring in talent, because I feel like there are some programs that are just unfixable. They're too deep in the hole. They can't bring in talent, and no matter who you are, I mean, I know that's always, there's a chance that you could turn it around, but there are certain places that it's just wait to pick your spot. Mm-hmm. So I agree with the premise of go to the right spot.
Okay, so our defensive MVP, Joey Bosa, kind of Joey Bosa, but I like the Darren Lee pick as well. Looking a little broader now, we always like to talk about the playoff. People like to talk about the playoff. I get in fights on Twitter with people about polls and how meaningless they are, and are they meaningless, they're not meaningless. The thing that matters is trying to think like the committee thinks, which is a different discussion to me than what do the polls say. The polls don't matter. The polls only matter in how they inform the discussion about the committee. So we have some very big games this weekend while Ohio State is off. There are 3 huge games with playoff implications. TCU and Baylor, the 2 remaining unbeaten teams in the Big 12, play each other. Auburn and Mississippi State, both in the SEC West, both unbeaten, both in the top 3, they play each other. And Oregon and UCLA, who both lost on the weekend, which took some luster off their game, but they're still the 2 best playoff candidates, I feel like, in the Pac-12. The winner of Oregon-UCLA this weekend is going to remain in the playoff picture. All those games, believe it or not, are at 3:30 on Saturday. So if you're not watching Ohio State, sit down at your TV and watch these 3 games. I know you want to talk about Arizona. The question is, will the Big Ten at the end of the year have a team in the playoffs? Not right now, not should they. Let's go, will they? Will the Big Ten have a team in the 14 playoff? Your guess right now, Ari.
No.
Bill?
No, I still think too much needs to happen for a Big Ten team to get in.
I also will say no. And I know we talked a lot early in the year. The thing that the Big Ten can't escape, it was a wild, crazy weekend for college football. We know that. But it was a wild, crazy weekend within conference play. Yeah. You cannot erase the Big Ten's non-conference losses. And I think there's a possibility that those are going to come back to hurt them when you're trying to compare conference champs. Because that's what it's going to come down to. It's not really about what conference you're in necessarily, but it's about who you get to play in that conference. And so when you look at a team like Arizona right now, for instance, which is an upstart, undefeated team off a huge win at Oregon, they're still going to play a lot of good teams in the Pac-12. They're going to play UCLA. They're going to play USC. They're going to play Arizona State. More good teams than Michigan State and Ohio State will get to play. We're going to get to find out, for instance, whether Arizona or not is for real, right?
Yeah, it's a shame when you can't earn quality wins in your own conference. And Ohio State, like you said, Arizona already has the best win in college football this year. Arizona's probably not going to run the table, but they're not going to because they have to play the teams you just mentioned.
Right.
But if they do, then they're unquestionably a playoff team. Maybe even if they only lose 1 game, say they lose to UCLA by 8 points or 6 points, and then they run the table and win the Pac-12, they still have a better resume than what Ohio State's going to have if they run the table. So it's just Ohio State has 1 shot at beating Michigan State on the road, and they also need Michigan State to hold up their end of the bargain and by not losing again. And it still is going to be questionable.
I think there's going to be, when we get to the end of the year, I think that there's going to be more discussion, I think, than we anticipate right now about whether or not a Big Ten team should get in. Because I think I would assume that either Michigan State or Ohio State is going to finish with 1 loss and probably be the Big Ten champion. Mm-hmm. And then, Florida State playing Notre Dame, one of those teams is going to have a loss. What possibly ever comes out of the Big 12 is going to have 1 loss. The second place team in the SEC West is going to have 1 loss. So you're going to have a lot of 1-loss teams, and I think either Michigan State or Ohio State is going to be in that mix. So I think we'll be talking about it later.
Oh, yeah. No, I think absolutely that team is going to be in the discussion. And I think Ohio State is doing everything it can possibly do since the Virginia Tech loss to start to get back into this discussion. It's not just winning. It's winning very impressively. It's winning in a fashion that can maybe put that Virginia Tech behind you, Virginia Tech loss behind you, and treat it as a one-time thing, and that's not the team they are anymore. I think by the end of the year, if Ohio State continues on this path, I think Ohio State potentially would make a very, very strong case to be one of the top 4 teams in the country. I just think they are still going to need help, and we know there are going to be losses we don't expect. But you're still going to have to, have your conference help you a little bit. It would help if Nebraska would be really good and be there waiting in the Big Ten title game. The conference has to help them.
There's 2 things that I'll say. One, Michigan State did them a favor last year because they won their bowl game and they beat the Pac-12 team. And I know that last year has nothing to do with what the committee is going to say, but these are people, and the way a person feels about a team could be different based on the way that they viewed them in the past. Mm-hmm. That's a fact. So the fact that the Big Ten team not only won and beat Ohio State, which was a very good team last year, and then went on to, in the Big Ten championship, it was a big game, and they went on to win their big bowl game. So the Big Ten champion, the best team in the Big Ten, was an elite team last year. 2, it's just funny to me to think that Ohio State was so close to winning that Virginia Tech game. Mm-hmm. They erased that lead. They had the ball. If they would have won that game, that close game, they'd almost be the favorite right now to be.
They'd be undefeated. They would have looked great in their last 3 games. They'd be in the top 5. People would look at their schedule and say, listen, they have a clear path. They have 1 game they have to win, and they're going to be in.
It's crazy to just think that, 8 minutes of football in the second half of the 4th quarter of the Virginia Tech game.
Which is why when people love to say that college football has the best regular season in sport because of all this. And people were worried when you expanded it and went beyond the 2 teams getting in that you would hurt the regular season, which is ridiculous. I mean, you still pay for every loss. It's still a tiny, tiny little percentage of teams that get a chance to play for a national title. That one bad game early in the year still has a chance to really hurt Ohio State. I agree with the idea. You don't want to get to the point where you say, if you win this week or not, it doesn't really matter. You're fine. You pay for your losses. So I think the thing that in the end could hurt Ohio State or any Big Ten team is I'm still convinced that 2 SEC teams are going to get in. Yep. And I still think, Florida State has an inside track in a weaker conference with that coming off a national title. If you assume, doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I like to think of those are 3 spots that are taken. That means everybody else is fighting for 1 spot. That's the Pac-12 champ, the Big 12 champ, Ohio State, Notre Dame, everybody else fighting for 1 spot. No matter who you are, that's going to be a hard battle to win. That will do it this week for our Big Ten Ohio State show. The Buckeyes off this week. Then they start a run at home against Rutgers the next week. We will take it all the way through until the end of the year. It's not that far until we get to Michigan State. It will be here before you know it. So, as always, follow us all week. We have a huge series this week during the bye week led by Ari talking about recruiting quarterbacks, how they get here. We're looking at it nationally. We're talking about Danny Clark, a 2017 Ohio State quarterback recruit. That story is up on the website on Tuesday. We're going to have stuff about Joey Burrow, Torrance Gibson, JT Barrett. We love to talk about quarterbacks. We're talking about how they get here.
It was a very in-depth, took us a long time. Idea manifested with Doug and I eating chips and salsa at Chili's 6 months ago. And I've been reporting and asking questions and looking at numbers in the time since. And there's so much interesting stuff with the way that the most important player on the field arrives at Ohio State. Is it because the recruiters on the team are the best, or is it just simply where they're born? And the numbers suggest that Ohio State's been the program that they are because the best players in the history of their conference or of their program have been born in Ohio or in the areas around it. So please read. We'd love to hear your feedback, and thanks again for your support.
Thanks again for watching. Ari Wasserman, Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmeises. Thanks for paying attention here on cleveland.com.